Vishavtem al ha'oretz lovetach. Music to our ears to hear the Torah giving us such a wonderful guaranteed promise to be able to live in Eretz Yisrael, lovetach, with total bitachon, free of any threat, free of any danger, that we're able to focus on developing our lives and our family and Klal Yisrael. Vishavtem al ha'oretz lovetach. Verse 18, and repeat it again in Pasuk 19. That the that the economy will flourish and be prosperous, and to live in total security and free of any threat. This is the promise. This is the dream that the Torah promises us, but it's on condition. And that Parshas Behar is about the condition, and the beauty of this condition is also something very profound and very beautiful. First of all, it starts with probably one of the most revolutionary ideas in the Torah, which is the Yovel year. The Jubilee year every 50 years was a total economic, total makeover. The whole nation completely changed its gear in the Yovel year. The Yovel year was, if you like to use a moshel from the world of computers, it was the reset button, restore factory settings. In other words, everybody started off with a chelek in Eretz Yisrael, with a piece of ancestral land. And don't forget, in biblical times, the whole economy was agriculturally based. Right? All your wealth was based on your land. If you had a piece of land, you had a house, you had a farm, you could sow, you could reap, you could produce food, you could sell, you could have animals. It was a basis for life. And 90% of people worked in agriculture. Today, I think it's about 2% of people work in agriculture. But in biblical times, that's how people lived. And therefore, agriculture was at the heart of what it meant to have a life which was based on a stable economy. But unfortunately, people were unsuccessful and got into difficult situations and had to sell their land. But you couldn't sell your land freehold. You could only sell it for a maximum of 49 years. 50 years, it came back to you. If you had to sell yourself as an Eved, again in the Yovel, it came back to you. If you had to take out debts, and the Yovel year, a cancellation of debts. And therefore, everything was reset again, and everybody had a chance again. And with this one mitzvah in the Torah makes sure that Klal Yisrael can never get into a situation of permanent poverty, where a very small percentage of the nation are the landowners, and everybody else are the serfs, are working for them and are enslaved for generations and generations. This can never happen. Yovel is an act of national generosity to make sure that we are all working together as one nation, and nobody really descends into the poverty trap, which is so famous throughout human history. What's interesting here is that this is part of the condition, that if we look after Klal Yisrael in such a way, and we're willing levater, we're willing to give up of ourselves for each other, then vishavtem ala oretz lovetach. But that's just the first part of it. The second part of it is the Torah then goes on to describe 4 different stages of a person sinking into poverty. The first is, and in each one starts off with the word ki yamuch achicha. Yamuch means to go low, to be in a lower and disadvantaged financial situation, and to be desperate. In the first situation, ki yamuch achicha, he sells his land. The second situation, ki yamuch achicha, even having sold his land, he still needs to borrow money and he can't pay interest, and you have to give him an interest-free loan. The third level is he sells himself as an Eved Ivri to another Jew, that you have to treat him properly and not exploit his situation. And then the last worst situation is he sells himself as an Eved to a non-Jew. And then there's a mitzvah of Geula to redeem him from that situation, a type of Pidyon Shvuyim. The Torah gives us all these different levels, and in each point along the way, there's a mitzvah of Klal Yisrael to make sure that every individual is looked after. And in general, every society is judged by the way they look after the least advantaged and the most vulnerable members of society. If we are protecting the most vulnerable members of society, then that's a sign of a high moral level of the society. And that's what Parshas Behar is all about. And in the middle of that, the Torah says, if you manage to maintain these levels of care and concern for each other, then vishavtem ala oretz lovetach, then you will indeed be able to live a life of prosperity and security in the land of Israel, and that's guaranteed. The key idea, though, is, very interestingly, that I think in this week's Parsha, maybe more than any other Parsha in the Torah, I haven't checked completely, but that's my guess, the word achicha appears. When you're dealing with this other person who is in a difficult situation, the first thing to be aware of is that he is achicha, ki yamuch achicha. It's not ki yamuch ish. He's your brother. He's your brother because he's your brother, therefore we're all in this together. Like Yehuda said about Binyamin, his brother, to Yaakov, he said, Anochi erevenu, miyodi tavakshanu, I will be a guarantor for him. Nothing will get past me. I'll lay down my life for him. That is the sense of achva, of brotherhood, which it should exist in Klal Yisrael. And Baruch Hashem, we do see it very often. The people do in difficult times come and act in a brotherly way and lay down their own life and their own safety and their own money in order to help each other. And that is the greatest inner strength that Klal Yisrael has. The Rambam writes in one point, takes this one stage deeper, like the Rambam always does. What is really the basis conceptually for the idea that we are all brothers and sisters? And that is, Bonim atem l'Hashem Elokeichem. Because we are all bonim to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because we are all children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in a sense, what he's saying here is, it's not the biological link that's important. What's important is that we're all part of a brotherhood. What is that brotherhood? That is a brotherhood of emunah, a brotherhood of chesed, a brotherhood of Torah and mitzvahs, a brotherhood of bonim atem l'Hashem Elokeichem, that we are all committed to the same God in the same way, with the same Shabbos and the same Yontef, and the same halachas of kashrus and everything. These are the guarantors that we are living as achim, and we're davening every day, Acheinu kol beis Yisrael, hanasunim b'tzara v'shivya. Of that whole tefillah, the most important word is the first word. If we really regard each other as Acheinu, then we are really on the way to achieving Vishavtem al Oretz Levetach. And I'd just like to end with one very beautiful little gematria in the Parsha, on the Pasuk which speaks about the Yovel year. So the Pasuk says the Yovel year is indeed a revolutionary economic idea to ensure a well-being even for those in lower economic levels. But it's much more than that. It's a year of Kedusha, because it's a year that you dedicate yourself to spiritual pursuits. It's a year where you recognize, as the Pasuk says, Ki li ha'aretz, that actually, even though vis-a-vis the non-Jewish world, we assert our ownership of the land of Israel totally, nevertheless, vis-a-vis HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ki geirim v'toshovim atem imodi, we are tenants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It doesn't belong to us. We are living in God's land. And because we're living in God's land, therefore this requires of us all these halachas. But the Pasuk ends up, it says, what happens in the 50th year? Everyone goes back to their ancestral lands. V'shavtem ish el achuzoso v'ishal mishpachto. Everyone can go back to the land that chelik of Eretz Yisrael, which he inherited. But there's a last word here in this pasuk, which is completely unnecessary. The pasuk could have said, "V'shavtem ishel achuzoso v'ishel mishpachto." Full stop. That would make a lot of sense. But it says, "V'ishel mishpachto toshuvu." What does toshuvu mean? Toshuvu is simply repeating the same verb again. That they'll go back to the land. They'll go back. Right? So we'll go back to the land of Eretz Yisrael in the Yovel year. Toshuva, you'll go back. So I saw a very beautiful gematria, which is, I find, a little bit inspiring, especially because Parshas Behar is always read either just before or just after Yom Ha'atzmaut, just before or after we're celebrating this great gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us in our generation, that we can go back to the land of Israel. That Toshuvu, spelt in the Torah, Tov Shin Beis Vov, is actually the gematria of Tov Shin Chet. Tov Shin Chet is, of course, the Hebrew year of 1948. The year of 1948, Tov Shin Chet, is a remez here in the Torah. In which pasuk? In the pasuk which says, Ish el mishpachto toshuvu, that we'll go back and we will return to the land of Eretz Yisrael. And that was prophesied that Tov Shin Chet, 1948, will be a key year for us to come back to Eretz Yisrael, and halavai, we should live to see Vishavtem al Oretz Levetach, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will protect us from danger and enable us to prosper and live a life of Torah and mitzvahs of chesed and ahava, achva, shalom v'reyos. Amen.